Welcome to episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about training an artificial brain. So we talked about a neural network and we talked about parameters, but how do we actually go about training this? So we're going to do the most important training task in all of AI today. And that is determining whether or not an image is of a blueberry muffin or a chihuahua. Surprisingly challenging. Take a look. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a bunch of images of blueberry muffins, and we're going to take a bunch of images of our dogs, and we're going to pass these through a neural network to train it. Now, important to note that our parameters, so remember all of these lines, so the green lines, red lines, and blue lines here, all of these parameters are just going to be set to random numbers, right? We don't know how important different aspects of the image are to determining whether or not something is a blueberry muffin or a dog. We have no idea. So we're just going to set these to be random numbers. And then we're going to pass through one image or one set of images at a time. So we're going to pass an image of, let's say, a blueberry muffin through the model with the random parameters, and it's going to give us a prediction. And the parameters are random, so it doesn't know what this is, right? So it's just going to predict dog. And the actual label is blueberry muffin, of course. So what we're going to do then is we're going to update the parameters. So we're going to change the parameters to try to get closer to a prediction of blueberry muffin rather than a prediction of dog. Let's look at another task. How about if I have this image? I want to say how many blueberries are in this particular image of a blueberry muffin. So again, collect a bunch of data and I'll pass it through my neural network. Perhaps my prediction here is 2, my actual label is 4, and then I have an error of 2, right? Because my label is 4, prediction is 2, 4 minus 2 is 2. I know, I promise no math. There is going to be a few pieces of simple math in this series. Anyway, so we have this error, which is 2. This error is the feedback that we're going to use in order to train our network, because we're going to say we want to minimize this error. We want this error to be as close to 0 as possible. This is called our loss function. So minimizing the error is our loss function. It's going to define the model's goals. So remember when I talked about an objective function for our model? One objective function for a model is a loss function, which just explicitly defines our model's goals. It tells us how wrong the model is. So in this same example of how many blueberries, if my prediction is 2 versus my prediction is 400, those are very different predictions with very different errors. One is an error of 2 and one is an error of 396. So not only does it tell us that the model is wrong, it tells us how wrong the model is. So how much we actually need to change those parameters. So what do we do once we know how wrong the model is? Well, we figure out how much we need to change the parameters in order to improve the prediction. And we do this through a process called backpropagation, which is a really long word. And what it means is we go backwards through a network and we calculate how much each parameter impacts the loss and whether we should increase or decrease the parameter to make the model's prediction closer to the correct label. Then we have to actually make the changes to the parameters. And we do this through a process called gradient descent. And this uses information from backpropagation to update each parameter slightly in the direction that's going to reduce the loss, helping the model make better predictions over time. So let's look at an intuitive example. So let's say that you are in a mountain race, and here at the bottom, you can see a little flag. This is the finish line, and your goal is to get to this finish line. You are randomly placed somewhere on this mountain, right? You are the parameter, randomly initialized, randomly set somewhere on this mountain. Now the loss is the goal of minimizing the distance from your goal here, right? Your goal being that flag, that end of the race. You want to minimize that distance. And so I want to get closer here because that minimizes the distance from my goal. So backpropagation is going to say which direction to move to reduce the loss. So backpropagation basically says, all right, parameter, you need to move down the mountain in order to get closer to the end of the race. And then gradient descent is actually going to take the step in that direction. So gradient descent actually moves you from where you were randomly initialized down the mountain. How large this step is called our learning rate. And learning rate is one of the most important aspects of training a neural network. If your learning rate is too small, like it is here, it's going to take a really, really long time to reach your goal or train your model, right? It's going to take you a really, really long time to finish the race. So you're definitely not going to win the race. And if your learning rate is too large, you're going to end up very far from your goal, and you risk never finding it because you might bounce back from mountain to mountain and never actually reach the end of the race. All right, so this brings it all together. We have a parameter that is randomly initialized. We're trying to minimize the distance from our goal and finish the race, get down that mountain. Backpropagation is the process of saying which direction we need to move to reduce the loss and get closer to the end of the race. And gradient descent actually takes a step in that direction. So it's actually going to move you from where you are randomly placed down the mountain in the direction that is initiated by backpropagation. And how large that step is called the learning rate. Important to remember that we aren't just doing this with one image. We're doing this with many, many, many images, or many, many, many pieces of text or pieces of data. And so there is an immense amount of data required in order to accurately train a neural network so that it doesn't overfit. And we'll talk about overfitting in a future video. All right, stick around for training versus inference, because that's our next episode. Thank you for joining me for this episode in the AI for People Who Hate Math series. This is an unscripted series that is inspired by my conversations with people who feel like they can't conceptually understand AI because it's just too much math. And it usually is. Most AI classes, tutorials, and videos are full of math. The AI classes that I teach as a professor have math on nearly every slide. I wanted to challenge this assumption that AI could only be conceptualized by people with strong math backgrounds. Especially as AI permeates our daily lives, I think it's important that everyone understands the technology, at least conceptually. Because without it, we're putting a lot of trust into systems we don't understand. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there are topics that you want to see covered. The initial launch is 20 episodes, and I am excited to see what you think.